Every day, tens of millions of American kids go off to school, but are we expanding their minds or turning them into robots who can't think for themselves? Do competition and grade levels and grading make for kids who try harder or dumb them down? Is there a better alternative? Meet Resa Steindel Brown. She's author of The Call to Brilliance. She's an educator and concerned parent who's been involved in homeschooling and alternative education for several decades. She practices what she preaches, and she's used those theories to successfully raise 3 happy children. Pleasure to have you here today, Resa.
Oh, my pleasure, Greg. Thank you.
You know, to me, it seems like one of the most basic observations that I've made in life that all little kids are philosophers. They all want to know everything. Why? But so many adults lose that. The little kids have natural curiosity, but by the time they become adults, they've lost all that inquisitiveness. What happens?
Well, I think, and it is my experience, that we do that to them. Because a child at 2 explores absolutely everything and anything, and at 5, all of a sudden we sit them down, we tell them they're not smart enough to learn on their own, everything has to come from us, we have to direct everything they're doing, and we, little by little, turn it off.
So you really threw out, well, I don't want to say the baby with the bathwater, but you decided enough, you were not interested in the current educational system and just started from scratch basically for your children.
Right. Well, I looked at my 5-year-old and knew that he just wasn't going to fit into the local kindergarten. He was too active, he was too physically alive, he was too talkative, and he would ask too many questions for that environment.
Too many questions. And there was even some concern that he was slow? Was that child, or was it a different one?
It was the third child. The third
okay.
child. So
which is another point, that sometimes if the kids don't fit the mold, then people are concerned about, you know, is something wrong? Whereas you felt that if you work with the kids, or it's your approach that was wrong, not the kid.
Right.
I mean, I think that's your whole thing, is that, you know, the educational system wants to label the kids and grade them and assess them and rank them, but you seem to feel that if you approach them in the right way, that you can really reach almost any kid.
Right. Well, if you go by their natural development, they all read, they all do math, they all write, and if you look at each child and who they are and what they love to do, and you search for their interests that lead to their passion, that passion will lead them to their own brilliance. And that's everything. And that's what we did.
And it seemed to work successfully for your kids.
It worked for my kids. It worked for the kids for the school we had. It works for the kids in the program I'm running now for a local school district.
Oh, and you've got another program. I did want to mention you were involved in founding the award-winning GT Water School, which just amazed me when I read what you guys did.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Well, we started a school in a factory. It was purely philanthropic for the children of the factory workers and the business office. We took the curriculum from the child. We had no grade level. We had no grades. We had no curriculum when we started. We just looked for the needs of each individual child and tried to fill them. And as a result, one by one, each child started to manifest what most people would refer to as brilliance. And so they ended up in college at ages 10, 11, 12 in their areas of expertise. They were not pushed. They spent a half a day every day playing in an orchard, and they had great childhoods.
Well, I love what you did, because you started out with homeschooling, but then at some point you kind of all came together through this company, and which again, I give them a lot of credit for being willing to fund that. And it was great for the employees, because it was the children of the employees pretty much who went to this school, at least initially, right? Right. So you had the parents there and involved, and it's sort of like the ultimate daycare center.
Yes, it is.
Effect,
it was.
But yet giving them even better education.
It was, and the parents were involved in the kids' education as well, and they directed their education. It was kind of a hybrid school and homeschool.
Yeah, you really kind of, well, I would say institutionalized it, but in a good way. Because I think the one thing, and kind of in the back of my mind sometimes I wonder when I hear about homeschooling, although obviously there have been very successful cases of it, you wonder, you know, are the kids really working? Are they goofing off?
Right.
You know, so how, because there's a lot to take on raising or doing your kids' own education.
Right, right. Well, here's what you do. You look for their interests, and then you nurture them. And you provide an environment rich in tools and resources so they can grow. And you remove your concept of what a child is, and you don't limit them. And one by one, they all blossom, every single one of them. So children in our program now and children in the program then are involved all day long in doing the things they love, but they will also do the things that the adult asks as well.
Yeah, and that's what I wondered, because I know that, well, there are different theories about education, as you obviously know, whether, let's say genius or, well, education or learning comes from inside or outside, going back to the Greeks and Plato and all of that. But I can tell that obviously you feel that people are sort of, I don't know what you say, actualizing their potentiality or fulfilling what's inside already in some way, or finding themselves, I guess you would say, whereas instead of just having it imposed on them from outside, the way that a lot of people might think. But is that kind of your view of how it works for the kids?
Right. If you look for the kids' interests and their talents, you find them, and you find them early. So by the time they're 18, they're not lost. They're not wondering who they are and what their contribution might be in the world and what to do next. It's an amazing process. It's something you have to see and experience, but every child, each one of us was all born with a gift.
Now, how do you deal with the fact that, what I was wondering when I was reading this, because again, you were successful, your kids, they all went to college at a very young age and did well when they were in a more formal academic, or traditional academic setting, but yet you wonder, you had this experience with a piano teacher. At least from my point of view, sometimes learning is not all fun and games, as you know. So, on the one hand, so what do you do when, the kid suddenly decides, oh, well, calculus isn't my thing, so I'm just going to avoid calculus. But yet you feel that an educated person should have exposure to mathematics. And so how do you, what I mean, what if, how do you?
Here's the key, all right? The key is relationship. When you build a cooperative relationship with a child instead of a domineering relationship, where the child has a say in some part of his day, I find children more than willing to, okay, now put that thing down and do the math. They're more than willing to accommodate you. It's a whole different ballgame. Children who have no say, no direction in what they're doing, have to defend themselves, have to defend their time. They respond differently. If they have a close relationship with you, they will put down the thing they love and do the thing that you think is necessary as well.
I thought it was interesting, or you made a good point, that when you took kids from outside your more, let's say, free or freedom kind of education, free to explore, someone who had a more traditional background, they were kind of lost. And I think there was also adjustment probably for your kids who were used to the freedom when they would try to put them in a very rigid academic environment.
Right.
But you still feel, though, that, well, but they could make the transition. Your kids obviously did, to the more formal setting. But well, here's my point. It's that one of your kind of, you say that all educational systems have an agenda. And you really seem to feel that, I don't know, it almost sounds, I don't want to say socialist, because I'm not going to get into your politics, but that it's kind of, you say that they're preparing kind of like worker bees for the industrial complex, or that sort of, or the industrial, that they want people who, they, the government, whatever, society is trying to train little worker bees. They aren't really looking for creative, thoughtful people. They want very rigid, and to a certain extent they were succeeding because some of those people were lost when they came in from the more regimented.
Right. Well, this system was started 150 years ago. First public school in the United States was in 1852 in Massachusetts.
Wow.
Okay. Well, look around. Time has changed. Were there planes? Were there telephone? Was there a telephone? Were there movies? Was there? Certainly, there was no internet. So they had to have a whole different style of education. Life was different, and they, in fact, went to Prussia to see how to train the farm children to an industrial life. So it was a
to work in the factory and
it was it was a deliberate intent. Okay, I don't know if anyone remembers that anymore. So I don't know that that is the intent now, but we're in the same system. Nobody's changed it.
So we kind of inherited that legacy.
Right, and we take it as given, but it isn't given. We can create any kind of structure we want. All we have to do is do it. So we can adjust to this century.
What do you think of No Child Left Behind? That is, I hear so much in the news about that these days.
Right. I personally think No Child Left Behind leaves more children behind than ever.
I hear that from a lot of teachers, even in the traditional systems, don't seem to like it.
Right. Right. They're not really happy with it. And it's not, if you ask my opinion, it's not really having a standard. A standard is not a bad idea. It's how we execute that standard. And in my experience, most of their educational career depends on their skills. Reading is primary, and instead of taking reading at a child's pace, we stick to the agenda when some children need to go faster or they get bored, and some children need to go slower or they just get run over. And if we started early and went at their own pace developmentally, I think we would reach those standards.
We'll be right back. Lisa Dunn-Dern was a writer for a hit TV series and is the author of a series of children's books. She's now hosting an educational TV series for children for the Ethiopian government. Great to have you here today, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Well, now that you're advising foreign governments, I'd like to know what's wrong with our educational system here in America?
Well, we have a lot of problems in both the public and the private schools. I don't want to just pick on public schools.
Yep.
In public schools, we have overcrowding. We have a lot of schools still don't have computers and quality books.
Yep.
There's still a problem with teen pregnancy,
Sure.
drug use, and gang violence.
Isn't it a whole different world than when you and I imagine, went to school?
Completely. There was never gang violence.
And you know, when I went home for Christmas, I went back to the old high school and stuff and went by, and I thought, you know, these days, I never worried about somebody coming into the school where I went to school, in a fairly remote area, or, you know, smaller town, coming in with a gun and shooting. These days, a lot of times it is the small towns where
Absolutely.
You think of the inner city schools with problems, but these days, like some little small school in Wisconsin, somebody shows up with a gun and kills half the...
Right. The inner city schools, I think it's the gang violence, but the smaller towns, I think it's definitely like a Columbine situation. It's someone feeling excluded, and it's sort of...
You better be real nice to everybody you go to school with.
There's no teasing. It's not allowed
Yeah,
anymore.
Exactly. Nobody takes a joke anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and in private schools, I think drug abuse is still big because the kids actually have a bigger disposable income, so they can afford the drugs.
Yeah, you know, and that was something I noticed in college, because on the one hand you think, oh, private schools, it's the rich kids or the good kids, but let's face it, there are, well, a lot of them are druggies.
Right.
If whatever word you want to use.
Right.
I mean, you know, you could say, oh, the inner city schools have their problems with drugs and violence or something, but they're snorting it up
Right.
or whatever they're doing,
Absolutely.
you know, injecting.
And teen
as much
pregnancy
as
can happen in across the board. You know?
they just go off to, I don't know, Mexico or
Right.
something on vacation.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know,
and you never hear about it. Right. So, I mean, how do we fix it? I think parents, it's always, they can play a huge role, and it's basically just really, you know, showing up for the parent-teacher conferences and showing the teacher and your child that you support their education and you want the best for
Active
them.
parenting. Don't you love the parents who show up and say, you know, you can't tell my kid what to do?
Yeah, it tends to, they blame a lot on, and that's the other thing about one of the problems with our education is keeping quality teachers that don't feel bullied and threatened to go to work every day. So parents really have to
My
show
father
that.
was just the other way. He was like, you know, if he doesn't do what you want him to do, let me know.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
that kind of thing
right,
was
right.
for,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
came from that sort of a family too, where you had to get a good education. You had to try.
Well, what else? As I say, with all of those problems, what can you do? Where do you even start?
Well, I think it starts when your children are very little. I think what you really need to do as a parent is give your children a sense of purpose. They need to know, you know, sort of why they're here. And you encourage your kids, you challenge your kids, and you nurture your kids. And you don't, and I think a lot of people end up either giving too many material things to their children to fill that void, or they give them unrealistic praise, which is, you know, they take 2 swimming lessons and they tell them they're ready for the Olympics. If they keep taking swimming lessons, they absolutely will be ready for the Olympics, but it can't be unrealistic praise because that actually has the opposite effect. It works against their self-esteem. They know what, you know, they can kind of see what's really going on with their progress.
So if you keep saying they're an Olympic athlete, but they're
just beginning. It's like their 4th, you know, swimming lesson. You're not doing them, you know, you're doing a profoundly bad thing, I think, because you have to be realistic, you know. And I also think on the other side, if parents who expect their kids to sort of be like, you know, trained little show kids that go out and get straight A's, and the kids are doing it just for the parents.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's no internal voice that they are really motivated to get the A because
Especially,
they want the A.
Oh yeah, at the private schools where you will go to the right preschool, the right kindergarten, the right elementary school, junior high, high school.
Right.
Only because, you know, so mommy and daddy can say they raised a little doctor or something.
Exactly.
You know, it's not about education.
It's competition for the parents.
And getting right, bragging rights for the parents, getting the right job, making the right amount of money.
Right.
But if the little kid ends up
Unhappy.
yeah, or even not even really learning anything.
And their internal voice is not, it's not what they really want to do. I mean, you can have a BC student who internally really loves sort of the experience of learning and loves school and loves that whole, and they may be a B or a C student, but they are doing it because they're motivated, but the A student is motivated by what their parents want, and what you end up doing with that A student is when they're older, they end up sort of becoming people pleasers, and it's hard for them to figure out what really makes them happy. If they've always been taught that they have to do it for an external reason, and it's really hard to find yourself, I think, as an adult when you haven't been allowed just to sort of be yourself. And my favorite story is, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King was a C student, but he clearly was motivated, and he clearly had a purpose, and he had self-esteem. So, you know, you can't always, you know, push your kids.
By the way, I've heard the same thing about Einstein. I believe was a C student.
Yes, they struggled. A lot of them did, actually.
And you know, so and I think you know, you remind me a lot of Resa, of what she said. I love, you know, just by coincidence that you guys are saying a lot of the same thing, because you know, again, you could see a parent saying, oh, you know, telling Einstein's parents or Martin Luther King's parents, oh, you've got a little dummy there.
Right? Can you? And you know they were labeled. They probably that's before.
Kind of slow, you know, not too bright, not too swift upstairs.
That's before we knew, like Resa was saying, not to label, and it's, you know, you just kind of let them be passionate about who they naturally are. And I know it's a very provocative concept, but it makes perfect sense. And I think everybody, all adults, sort of have a thread of who they are as children. And if you do have parents that inspire you and that are paying attention, they can. It may not be that, you know, they want to be a baker. That's what they want to do, exactly. And they are passionate about it. You sort of have to.
And I think that, you know, again, what you're getting at is a good point, that if you have somebody who is, let's say, really a great genius, or, you know, just an outstanding person in whatever field, that they may be outside the norm or do things their own way or not fit that mold, you know, which, you know, everybody might want to fit you into just because of who they are.
Right. And you hope that child has really brave sort of parents that can sort of think for themselves and not worry about it.
Well, I love what you did, because you also reminded Resa, one thing that you have is your acting.
Oh yes, the children's theater
troupe.
Yes.
But I loved your comment I read online on your website, I think, that you said that the way you cast it, though, casting directors are falling dead all over town.
I know. They hate me.
Well, how do you cast it?
I pick from a hat.
Pick from a hat. So they win the lottery.
They win the lottery, and you know, you do The Sound of Music, and sort of, you know, the Von Trapp children look nothing like each other, or nothing like the Von Trapp children that you've ever seen before, and you know, Oliver looks completely different, the Music Man, but they all learn their lines. They all get to be the star for that day, and I just feel that kids have so much competition later in life with everything. As adults, we compete for everything, down to the parking spot out front of the studio just now. You compete for everything. Oh. So
in LA, let me tell you, you're always competing for parking around here.
So I thought, if they can have like a moment in their childhood with me where they didn't have to compete, I just picked their name out of the hat and they got to be the star. That's my gift to them for that.
And for the casting directors who are sitting there saying, I don't know about that. How does it turn out?
I have to tell you, I've had the best Annies, Olivers, Music Men you've ever seen, because they're so excited that they got the lead role that they really work hard. They really work hard, and it is parent support. Their parents, you know, come and make sure they're on time at the rehearsals and they know their lines. And I tell them, you know, before they put their name in the hat, there is a job description of what each role entails.
If you go out for Annie,
you're going to be on stage the whole time.
Tomorrow.
Right, exactly. You got to do tomorrow, exactly. Yeah. If you don't want to do that, you can be stage crew. And you can be behind the scenes, but be part of the production, and you make it happen. And
do you feel that you have helped? I mean, can you, to yourself, would you say, you know, yes, that you actually did see somebody maybe grow or nurtured somebody who might not have, who became a star, who might not have even thought they had a chance?
Considered it. Two stories. I have one story that when one little girl got picked her teacher called me and said, after about 4 weeks of rehearsal, her teacher called me and said that she had not been reading at grade level, and after she got the starring role as Annie, she started reading much better because she was so into reading her script.
But hell, I could read this book on Annie.
Exactly.
I could do it. She was probably singing Tomorrow in class too.
Exactly. And then my favorite was a little boy, Austin, who won the role as the Music Man, and he was a straight A student. He never saw himself as creative. I mean, never. And he was the best Music Man, and he just got out there and sang and danced, and he was amazing. And so I really saw him grow in a different way. He saw himself as in a different way.
And I hear you're doing a series now for the Ethiopian government.
I am. I am hosting a children's television show in Ethiopia.
Wow.
And I must brag for a moment. My audience is 42 million, which is bigger than the PBS audience here in America. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, it's all about global these days.
Yes, it is.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck with that. I'd love to hear more about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here today. And I know that we'll try to show your book here, Hair Today, Gone Tomorrow, the children's series.
Yes, and my second one is the same family. It's called Dr. Dog is on Duty. They get a dog, and the dog is a volunteer children's hospital.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. And we are back with Resa Steindel Brown, author of The Call to Brilliance. Wasn't Lisa great?
Oh, I thought she was terrific. I so enjoyed talking to her.
So what did you seem like you're both pretty much on the same page with a lot of things.
We just met in the hall, and we are, and I like that a lot. She has a sense of life and passion and love for kids, and the vision that we can all be more, that we can do more, that we can have more energetic, fulfilling lives.
So how can we be more? What can we do? What should we be doing to change our educational system? And
instead of processing these children, and instead of the concept of just taking classes like we take medication, if we
crossing off the list of the required courses.
Right, now you've taken it like your vitamins, and now we can move on. If
medicine.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. If we search for each individual child's interests and talents and passions, and we understand that they have them. Like, I love what Lisa said about the thread of who they are. She and I talked about that in the hall. They have that from the time they're born. And we just run over it. We don't look for it. We don't see it. We don't recognize when it's there. If we shift our perspective and start looking for that, because we don't usually find what we're not looking for, but if we look for it and search for it and nurture it, then we have these incredible kids doing these incredible things in all kinds of different ways, and they wake up each morning excited about life. And as adults, it would be...
I believe you said that with your own kids, indeed, you looked back and saw how really there really was that thread that they, what they did later in life, you could really trace back to their youth.
I'll tell you a funny story. Our daughter Erin was 2 years old, and she did this finger painting, and something about it just struck me as stunning, and I couldn't even explain why, and the little voice in the back of my head said, artist. Years later, she had the opportunity to go to the Art Center College in graduate work in design or do math, but that thread of art went through her whole life, and it's still there. And and I don't know, it was just a moment of epiphany. I had nothing to support it, but parents I work with, if you look, you find it. You look at the doodle in the corner and you go, my goodness, there's intelligence there. Or the writing and the scribbles in the margin, or the something that the child has done or built.
I think even with one of your sons, that he always liked to take things apart.
Yeah, from the time he was little, and now he's I can never get it straight.
Something with computers.
Yeah,
right?
he does the design. He does the architecture. He does the systems architecture for the computers, and he's running a company out of Hong Kong with programmers in Singapore and the Philippines and Shanghai, and a company here in the United States as well. And he's in his 20s.
And he was building computers or electronics and taking them apart and assembling and playing around, and that led him into...
From the time he was 4.5 on, but he didn't read until he was 9. So we nurtured that love while, waiting for his other skills to come in. And when they did, it just all exploded, and he blossomed. And
so instead of just saying, you're going to be a doctor,
Oh, that's terrible. That's death. Because
Oh,
you
but I
kill
know
a
people
person.
who've done that. Oh, yes, and they did, and boy, the kids were just messed up for life.
Right. No, we're all individuals. We all have a talent. The talents are different. Okay, if you impose that, a friend of mine wrote a book called Midlife Crisis Begins in Kindergarten. Okay, it's when we lose track of who we are and what we love and why we're here.
And even as I think Lisa said, becoming maybe people pleasers later on if you want to keep mommy and daddy happy and go to law school and, you know.
You keep everybody happy, and then you don't know who you are, and then you lose everything.
And by the way, Mom, I think you deserve a plug there yourself. As I was saying during the break, you gave up your career
to
do this. And I mean, you really, as I say, you know, you put your philosophy into practice. A lot of people talk about education, but you devoted your life to raising your kids well and making sure they got a good education.
Right, right. But I'll tell you who benefited from it the most. I did, because they taught me, because I grew. I learned from them, and it didn't matter that I had all those years of teaching before I had them. I learned so much from my kids, and I learned from all the kids that I've worked with. So it's really, I'm the one who's privileged. I was the one who reaped the benefit most.
So you didn't give up a career, you gained...
I gained insight into life. I gained insight into who we are as human beings and how we grow and how we blossom, and it helped me recover my own sense of passion, my own sense of getting up in the morning and saying, I can create this incredible day doing the thing I love.
Well, we should all be so lucky. Thank you very much, Resa, for being here. I sure appreciate it. The book is The Call to Brilliance, Resa Steindel Brown. That's just amazing. Well, thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care.